Okay, it says we are live.
Yeah,
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I am McKenna from Murder by the Book in Houston. I'm so excited to have Caz Frear here with me today. How are you today, Caz?
yeah, really well. Thank you. Really, really well. Feeling Christmassy.
Yes, me too. It's the start of Advent. It's December 1st, holiday music playing, candles going. So it's that time for us to officially get the season underway. I'm going to go ahead and get you introduced and we'll start this chat. But I do want to say that if you have any questions, you can pop them in the comments. I will be checking my phone periodically. Also, we're trying a new streaming service today, StreamYard, so you should be able to see this on Facebook and YouTube simultaneously, and hopefully I will be able to see your comments on my screen. But like I said, I'll be checking on my phone too, just in case. This is kind of our guinea pig this morning. Okay, so Caz Frear grew up in Coventry, England, and spent her teenage years dreaming of moving to London and writing a novel. After fulfilling her first dream, it wasn't until she moved back to Coventry 13 years later that the second finally came true. She has a degree in history and politics, and when she's not agonizing over snappy dialogue or incisive prose, she can be found shouting at Arsenal football matches or holding court in the pub on topics she knows nothing about. She's with us today to talk about her third Cat Kinsella novel, Shed No Tears, which is out today. Congratulations, happy pub day.
Thank you very much.
And we're so excited. You also sent us signed book plates, which I can do a close up here. So if you want to order Shed No Tears from us, we would love that. And we'll make sure to pop in a signed book plate. So how are you?
I'm well. All things, global pandemic aside, I'm well. Thank you.
Yeah. We're doing well. We're doing as I really can't complain. Now, I am a little bit jealous though. I need an update. I saw on Facebook the other day that you posted a picture of an inflatable pub for your backyard, and I am so jealous that that's even an option. Tell me about this inflatable pub, and did you talk your husband into it?
No, I'm still working on it. I usually win these kind of arguments in the end, but he did make a very good point that our back garden probably isn't big enough for it. But yeah, the UK is currently been split into 3 tiers. So tier 1 is the kind of looseness restrictions, and tier 3 is essentially locked down by another name. And we're in tier 3, unfortunately. So you can't really go anywhere. You can go outside and exercise more than you could under lockdown, but there's nowhere open. You can't really go out. So we were just talking about, it's December. We'd normally be doing this, that, and the other. And yeah, I can't actually remember how I came across it. I was on eBay, but I don't even want to think what I must have been putting into eBay to spot it. And it comes up that you can actually buy an inflatable pub, basically like a sort of bouncy castle pub. But it is £2,000, which is big. And because it's outside, that's obviously better, so you can mingle with people outside, you just can't mingle indoors. So I was thinking, well, that might be a nice idea, but probably the price should have told me that it was going to be fairly substantial. So unless we get one for the street, maybe, rather than just being in our back garden.
There you go. You can have a community pool and then take it up for the inflatable pub. I don't know, it looks pretty fabulous to me. I thought, how can we get this overseas? Okay, so I've noticed on a lot of our virtual events that because of the convenience of watching them from everywhere and the fact that you don't have to make a special trip to the bookstore to see someone, that we're getting a lot of new people watch these and who tune in after the fact and watch them on YouTube. So I know we're here to talk about the third in the series, but I was wondering if you could tell us just a little bit about your series character, Cat Kinsella, overall, and then where she finds herself in Shed No Tears.
Yep, sure. So she first appeared in my debut novel, Sweet Little Lies, which was 2018. Yeah, 2018 in the US. And Cat is a young detective with the Metropolitan Police Force at detective constable level, so kind of the lowest rank. And she has quite a dysfunctional family life, or she comes from a dysfunctional family background. And basically she gets assigned to a case where she starts to suspect that her father could be in some way involved in this murder. Not necessarily that he murdered the person, but that he knows he's kind of moving in those circles. So the first Sweet Little Lies is really about getting to know Cat and getting to know the wider team that she works with, but it's got this real balance of the personal and professional, and the blood ties win out in the end. I won't sort of spoil it for what happens, but it's really about her trying to, she's at the start of her career, she wants to be successful, and she actually doesn't have a very good relationship with her father or any of her family, to be honest. But sometimes just because you don't have a good relationship, it doesn't mean that huge emotional pull isn't there, and that you wouldn't, if it came to it, would you choose them over your job? So that's where we met Cat. Stone Cold Heart came a year after, and it's sort of hard to say without giving too much away, but let's just say the events of Sweet Little Lies carry into Stone Cold Heart, even though she's working on a brand new case, which is the story of a toxic husband and wife and a sort of who do you believe scenario. And then the third novel out today, Shed No Tears, these books have been written over 3 years, and so Cat is 3 years older by the time, or 2 and a bit years older by the time we meet her in Shed No Tears, and a lot has happened, and she is, she's growing in confidence. Her relationships, particularly with her family, have changed, so we sort of meet her in a slightly different place professionally, but also emotionally.
Yeah, and I am, as you know, a big fan of Cat and this series, and I'm glad that you have made her such a real character with the family issues, and that's continued. So what is she investigating in Shed No Tears?
So Shed No Tears is a little bit different in that she gets involved in the reinvestigation of a cold case. So 6 years ago, a killer, a serial or a spree killer, actually, not a serial killer, a spree killer, who the media nicknamed the roommate, killed a number of women over a very, very short space of time. And all but one of those women were found, but the remaining victim was seen with the spree killer literally just before she vanished. So it's always been assumed that she was never seen again. It's always been assumed that she was one of his victims too. And because he's a narcissist and a not particularly nice person, he, over the years, has admitted to killing her, then changed his mind, and has just been toying with the police for years. But when they eventually find her remains, she's buried a long, long way from where the rest of the victims were buried. The method of killing is different. And basically, there's a number of red flags, which mean they need to look at this investigation again. So it is a cold case, which means I suppose it moves at a slightly different tempo. You're not racing to catch the culprit before they do it again. But it's sort of I'm going to keep saying this, I don't want to give too much away, but it sort of branches out into looking at the institution of the police and the fallibility of the police, I guess.
Right, absolutely. So I'm distracted because we actually have comments showing up on the screen, so I kind of want to do a couple of those because I'm excited about this. So, and Rebecca has some comments or questions that are basically what I already have on my paper. So I was going to ask, Cat is a very real character with more family drama than I'd wish on anyone. Where did she come from, and did she spring fully formed? But related to that, and I'm going to try out this new thing here. Ooh, question for, I know, it's so exciting. How much of yourself do you see in Cat, and do you have a favorite character from the series? I love Steele. So let's talk about the origins of Cat a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, she initially, just to go right back, she initially wasn't even a detective, even though I think in terms of personality and age and background, but she started off as just a regular woman who believed that her father might be involved in a murder. And I was probably halfway through a very, very early draft of that. before I started to think, actually, this could be quite interesting if I made her a detective assigned to that case, and I'd always loved police procedurals. So I then decided to do that, and I thought it would just give it a lot more tension. So I had to sort of change my approach, but actually Cat and her voice came really, really easily to me. And I think even though I would always say, no, I'm not Cat, there are no parallels. My husband doesn't say that. He says when he reads my books, he always hears my voice. Our life experiences are completely different. She's 15 years younger than I am. I've never suspected my father of murder. There's lots of things that are different, but I guess she's got quite a dry sense of humour that I have. She probably second guesses herself a lot, that I can really relate to that. And I think because I write in the first person, present tense, I think you're always going to have a little bit of your personality starts to bleed into that character. The challenge is to rein it in, because you don't, do they call it the authorial voice? You don't want me to be suddenly putting my opinions on things. This has come from Cat. But it's you know, it's hard, and particularly after 3 years, I guess I've been writing her for so long. But her voice came fully formed.
Wonderful. And as Rebecca mentioned, she said that she loves Kate Steele. I too love Kate Steele, and I was wondering if you could talk about kind of their working relationship a little bit, because it's at times antagonistic, but I think it's fantastic that you've written such. I mean, it shouldn't be necessarily something we praise, but such strong female characters who are so unique in their perspectives and characters. Like, you would never get their voices confused. So you want to talk about kind of her as well?
Yeah, I mean, Steele was slightly inspired by somebody I not worked for actually, but I was in the same company with a number of years ago, and just we all had a bit of a girl crush on her. She was definitely Steele. She was quite small, so she's petite. She was quite fashionable. She looked quite girly, and then she would but she was absolutely terrifying, and you misjudged her at your peril, basically. And I think that's what I wanted to do with Steele. I wanted her to wrong foot people, and I mean, going back to Cat's family drama, she has a terrible relationship with her dad, or she certainly does at the start of the series, and she's not particularly close to either of her siblings. But I didn't want her to become this real kind of sad sack loner. So if she's going to have these issues with her family, I almost wanted to give her another family. And Steele and Parnell became part of that. And with Parnell, it's a very obvious kind of, he has 3 grown-up sons. She's kind of the surrogate daughter to him. That bit is kind of hammered home, I think, and is quite obvious. But I think with Steele, the mother figure is there, but it's not as doting. It's she wants Cat to succeed, but not at her expense. Whereas I think Parnell would, you know, put his career on the line to help her.
Yeah. Yep, she's a great character, and she certainly doesn't cut Cat any slack, but it's great. I mean, it's always well-intentioned. So we're going to do another question, and I was wondering the same thing. So John asks, I've never heard of a spree killer. What's the difference between it and a serial killer?
Oh, no. Now I'm going to wish that I could give you the perfect answer. It's to do with period of time, basically. So serial killers will generally have this period between murders where they go back to living a normal life, or living whatever life they were living. A spree killer is generally over the course of a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, where I guess some of them you could say, well, maybe they've done it before, but it's almost this sort of feeling that something just cracked and they do their damage over a very, very short period of time. I'm not sure if how different the psychology is from a serial killer, but it's all to do with that they just kill over a short period of time, and because of that, I think they almost expect to get caught. And most spree killers do get caught because it's hard to cover your tracks, I suppose. I'm sure there will be exceptions to that, but it is almost they want to get that urge out, knowing that they're only going to have a certain amount of time before they get caught, which the roommate Christopher Masters in the book is caught within 4 to 6 weeks of starting his spree.
And obviously their murders are premeditated, but it sounds like it's not the premeditation that goes and routine that goes into a serial killer over years. You know, particular methods and issues that are being dealt with. So yeah. Okay. Well, that's news to me. That's great. Okay. Speaking of serial killers, I do have a question for you. So you write kind of dark things, right? Serial killer books. Do you ever disturb yourself? Do you ever have nightmares? Does it ever affect you in real life?
I don't necessarily disturb myself with what I write, because even though they're very dark, I don't necessarily go into the gore so much. I don't think it's necessarily my strong point. I don't think it's necessarily always needed. But the research, definitely. I mean, you have to read some horrible stuff, and I know all crime writers, make the very black joke that you wouldn't want to see my internet history kind of thing, because you do. I think whoops, sorry.
You're good.
My desk there. I'm still here. I think I upset myself more because and Cat has a real empathy for the victim and who they were, and that they were a sister and a daughter and a wife, and I think that hits home a little bit more. What I've always tried to do with all the victims that I write about is they need a backstory for the narrative, obviously, but also so that they become people. They're not just the dead girl, that's been done to death. They need to be brought to life. And Cat very much sees herself as doing that. I mean, she actually, the victim in Shed No Tears, things start to come out about her, which don't necessarily make her a likable victim in the way that the media like a likable victim, a sort of wholesome middle class, that they are more newsworthy. So some things start to come out about her, and Cat actually says to Steele, I am struggling a little bit. It's not that I won't do my job, but I'm struggling to connect with this person. And because of that, they go back and they meet with her foster parent, and she actually seeks out people that can tell her the other side of the victim. And I think, that's kind of what hits home more, rather than scaring myself. I kind of upset myself about the waste sometimes, because all things, are based on true cases to a degree. And I think it's probably more emotional than scared.
Fair enough. So Rebecca was wondering if you've found writing the Caz books has become easier as you get further in. And as a side note to that, I know in the first book, obviously, because of the family backstory, Cat is investigating a case from the past while a case from the present. So you did do kind of a cold case from the past. But this one is, as you said, a cold case. Did you do that to challenge yourself, or so has the writing become easier? And then did you have struggles with this just being a cold case this time?
Yeah, I think they don't get easier, to be honest, and probably every writer would say that. They get easier in the sense that I know the characters, and certainly by Shed No Tears, I know exactly the way they move, the way they talk, who to give that line to, who would say that. When I'm out and about when I used to be out and about before 2020, and I'd hear, you know, somebody on a train saying something, I'd think, oh, Steele would so say that. And I have conversations with them, and so that makes it easier in that sense. But I think when you're writing a series, you've got to challenge yourself, and you've got to make sure that each book is distinct. You don't just want to be sort of phoning in the same kind of, you know, someone dies, here are the suspects, this is the resolution. You've got to try and make it feel different. And that's why, as you say, it started off with Sweet Little Lies, where Cat's family were very much linked to the case. Not that I would want to repeat that for in other books, but you can't really, or you become Jessica Fletcher, where you've got this sort of personal connection with every single case. And then the second book was very character driven, really honing in on this toxic marriage. And then, with the third, it was a case of what different scenario can I put Cat in now? And she'd never worked on a cold case. She says in, I think, you know, the first scene, it's the first time she's, and kind of linked to what I was saying before about her empathy, she says it's the first time that she's ever sort of been presented with some bones. She's normally got a body that she sort of connects with. So you always kind of have to find something different, because it's amazing getting feedback from readers about what they love, and you certainly do take that on board. But you need to find a different angle each time, I think.
Yeah. With that in mind, did you have a series arc in mind when you started writing?
No is probably the honest answer, because I guess when you're writing your debut, you don't know if it's going to be a series. You might hope it is, but you're not really sure. I think I knew from Stone Cold Heart to Shed No Tears what needed to happen. Stone Cold Heart definitely finished on a bit of a cliffhanger, and what does she mean by that? So I knew what had to happen in Shed No Tears, and you know, I have ideas about where she will go and how she'll grow and her relationship with Aidan, but it's funny, you think you have an arc and then you just find yourself going off down a different path, which is life, to be honest.
So fellow author Cara Black has a comment. Love Cat. Have you started writing her next investigation?
No, I'm writing a standalone next, which is different. It's been really, really different. Trying to sort of put those voices to bed, and start working. It's a standalone thriller. Very different, I think, in tone. If you like the Cat books, you'll definitely like this book. The tone is similar. There's sort of, I guess, the dry, dark sense of humour is in there, but it's about, you know, a woman much older than Cat, a very different life experience. So it's been very, very different. I have lots of ideas about Cat, and I won't give anything away about Shed No Tears, but again, that ends on not so much a cliffhanger, but I don't know how I'd describe it, with her making a really, really big decision about her life. So I've definitely given thought to what exactly that would mean, but it's kind of handy in a way, not that I could have ever known, but writing this standalone means Cat gets 2020 off, so I don't necessarily have to start referencing the pandemic and all the complications that would bring, because I don't think you necessarily have to reference the pandemic, and that's certainly something that authors have been talking about nonstop. Do we or don't we? But because in the rest of my books there has been this, I talk not in a very political way, but there are references to Brexit in Shed No Tears. There's references to, you know, police cuts, and I think because I have that slight, very light touch social side, it would be a bit weird then if I just said a book a year later and didn't reference what was going on at all. So I've kind of made my life easier in some ways than rest for a while.
Well, I had that question written down to see if you on involving that at all. And I mean, I think it's probably a good thing that you're able to definitely avoid it and see where it goes.
Do you sort of think, God, do I want to be reading about that? Or do you think it's too much of a mission not to talk about it?
I know several authors who've included it or who are leaving it in their books. I personally think it's fraught with peril. I think that people, especially right now, and who knows how long this is going to be affecting us, are reading books for escape. And so I think it's going to be hard to have something set during the pandemic, or at least have it play a large role. If it's mentioned in passing, and it doesn't affect the world of the characters, that might be okay. But I think it's going to be a challenge for readers because I think similar to here in the States, like Hurricane Katrina or even 9/11, I think the best books about that, it was discussed in nonfiction first, several years later. Like, there needs to be some distance and a look back period. That's not to say that there won't be a fantastic thriller set in COVID-19, but it's going to be hard to get me to read it, and I think it's going to be a challenge for other people. So a lot of authors that I've spoken with have found ways to bump up the book 6 months or back 6 months, or they're writing a standalone that's a historical or something so that they have avoided it. And I don't think that's a bad plan at all. Just my 2 cents.
In a police procedural as well, I think it's particularly fraught with problems because I was actually talking to somebody that he's not a CSI, but sort of works in that area. And he was saying in the first throes of the pandemic, normally you would have these swarms of teams, detectives turning up to the crime scene and all the crime scene technicians. And they had to pare that back. I mean, obviously they were doing what needed to be done. But it was really on minimal staff. Do we need, 3 detectives and 8 CSIs in this small living room? No, we don't. And so he was saying, for future novels, that could be fraught with, well, you could have people saying, were jobs done correctly? Was evidence collected correctly? Because it wasn't going through the same protocols as before the pandemic. So there's so much to consider there. I'm happy that I don't have to consider it, to be honest.
Well, in the legal process too, like I know that the whole court system has had to change to adapt to all of that. So it's I don't know, it would be very difficult. It's interesting. Michael Connelly's latest legal thriller actually is set or has references to COVID-19. And I know his next one he's planning on it, dealing with reality of current times, and it kind of fits his, the way he writes anyway, but it's 1,000% current date. But I was reading some reviews of the most recent book, which of course is a #1 bestseller and fabulous. But there are a lot of people who have commented that they're not thrilled with the fact that COVID is in it. So, I think it's just a tricky thing. And maybe, I know TV shows that have dealt with it have been equally praised and criticized. So I guess it depends on the reader / viewer. But if I were an author, I probably would not take that risk.
Readers, I think, certainly at the moment, like you said, maybe in a couple of years' time when there's been a little bit of distance, but I think most readers want escapism, and that doesn't often, when people talk about escapism in literature, they're referring to uplit or but really crime can be escapism. You don't necessarily need to root it right in the here and now.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see what books we have coming out next year. So your pacing has been rightfully praised in your books, and I was wondering, how do you keep the suspense going? This is my thinly veiled, are you a plotter or a pantser question.
A plotter, a huge plotter. I'm so in awe, and I know people that literally just start with okay, what if this happened to a character, and off they go. I can't do that. I think it's difficult with police procedurals because there is although I was saying you need to make each book distinct, there is a certain formula that a police procedural will follow. They will go to the crime scene. They will have the first briefing. They will interview the first witness, whatever. So that does help you plot the plot to a degree. But I think, yeah, when it comes to tension and suspense and red herrings, I need to know exactly where they're coming. And it's quite old fashioned. I've got friends who are plotters who use amazing sophisticated systems, and I just use an enormous Excel spreadsheet that is color coded and probably would make no sense to anyone but me. It doesn't make sense to me sometimes, but literally, I almost write a novella before I actually start writing the book in Excel, so I can see where the pacing is starting to drop, and where a red herring needs to be inserted. And I think, again, because my books, well, I think are character driven, I need to make sure that I'm not going too into Cat's head and too into, sort of monologues and her feelings on this, that, and the other, which is all really important, but there is a plot. There is a story that needs to be told. So just being able to look at that really, really helps me. But yeah, I mean, I probably spend 2 or 3 months looking more at Excel than I do at Word. Before I feel like I've really it. And I'll always go off piste slightly. And I write enormous what's the plural of synopses? Synopses,
yeah,
to send to my editor. I don't know how people write 500 word synopsis. Mine are about 5,000 words, and pretty much they know that what's in that synopsis will happen, because by that point I know the story inside out, and I'll let, there's something definitely in Sweet Little Lies that I won't call it a twist, but probably something that people were supposed to be a bit, oh, okay, that was never planned and suddenly came to me 2 weeks before my deadline. So yeah, things like that will always happen, but I find it hard to go on unless I know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So Rebecca also was wondering, was Cat, she has Caz, but Cat, I think I've mixed it up a couple times this time too, but
I should have given her a different name.
Well, I've got Caz on the screen in front of me, and then so anyway, was Cat always destined to be in the Met? And I have a related question. So as you've mentioned, you write police procedurals. So what is your outlet for research in that process?
So with regard to, was Cat always destined to be in the Met? I mean, I'm not sure if Rebecca means as opposed to other sort of more regional police forces. If that is the question, then yeah, definitely. I started writing Sweet Little Lies, or the early draft of Sweet Little Lies, just as I was leaving London and moving back to Coventry, which I was really excited to do for lots of reasons, but leaving London is always a little bit bittersweet. It was, the best thing I ever did, and I'm so happy now, and we're only an hour from London anyway. But I was definitely a bit homesick for London, and setting it in London almost gave me that opportunity to write about the place where I'd kind of grown up in the sense of my 20s and early 30s, and gave me lots of opportunity to go down there and research and find locations that I wanted to feature in the book. So yeah, I think I always knew she was going to be part of the Met Police. And sorry, what was the follow-up?
The second half is, how do you have a source for research for the procedural aspects of your police procedurals?
Yeah, I do. When I first started out, I'd grown up being obsessed with police procedurals, and I've been obsessed with Linda LaPlante and Prime Suspect. She was like my first real, I was stunned watching that show, and I was only 12, so I was probably a bit young to be watching it, but I was just so blown away by it. And that's why it always sat in the back of my head of that's what I want to write, but I didn't necessarily have the confidence because I didn't have that police background. But I'd read enough of them that I thought I knew how the mechanics of the crime genre worked. But Linda LaPlante is known for her books being authentic. She's known for lots and lots of things. And she famously, spent, when she wrote Prime Suspect, she spent 6 months with the Jane Tennyson equivalent. And I really wanted to emulate that as much as I could. The first thing I did was bought this massive tome called The Murder Investigation Manual of Amazon. And it is actually something that the Met used. I'm not sure if it's entirely current. And it literally takes you from the phone, the call coming in saying we found a body, to how you get this to court. And it's enormous. And I started reading it thinking, well, I'll just know everything about how the police work. There were probably bits of it that did help me and stayed with me, and I still have it. But it was a bit dry, and I think in the end I ended up feeling like I was sort of training to take my sergeant exams rather than about to write a novel. So I literally just put a message out on social media. I didn't know anyone in the police. I'd never set foot inside a police station. I was going in blind. And so I put this note on Facebook saying to people, does anybody know anybody in the police force that would be happy to answer a few questions? And so many people came back to me, and the few questions turned into, does anybody know anyone who's prepared to be daily harassed with ambushed day after day? So yeah, I've started working with one guy who's been fantastic. And what the Murder Investigation Manual, yes, was brilliant for telling me the nuts and bolts of an investigation. But I think what I ask him more about is this realistic? Would she call her mom? Would she call her by? All those sort of things about, cats can be quite feisty. And I wanted her to be feisty, but at the same time, there were elements of, seriously, would she speak to Steele like that? Because if she really wouldn't, I'll take it out or I'll tone it down. I want it to sort of reflect what a working Met murder team would be like. So yeah, he sort of reins me in that respect, but he's great. He really respects that it's fiction, and he always will say to me, I'll ask him questions and he can see what I'm getting at, and then he'll always come back with, what do you need to happen? And I'll bet maybe twice a book he will come back and say, absolutely not, that would never happen. And if anyone has, knows anybody in the police force, they'll throw the book across the room. That would never happen. But most of the time it's more, it might not happen, but if you frame it, as long as you make it clear that Cat's being a little bit out of the norm. So yeah, he's been an absolute mine of information. And you just really, and also a lot of crime authors have come from that background, who I'm friendly with now, or the legal background. So there's always somebody to ask a question of. It's a balance, sort of. I love the research side, and like I say, authenticity is important to me, but it is a balance of making the reader feel like you know what you're talking about without feeling like they're drowning in procedure. Because, if you take the actual mechanics of the murder investigation, it is quite slow, and that there are short bursts of activity, but it can be quite slow and pondering, and I want to show that, but in a way that makes the book, and I want to show the frustration, of working in the police force, but you need to be driving the plot forward. They can't sit around for 3 weeks waiting for a bank. Yeah.
Yeah.
He always tells me when I say, would I get bank statements back within 24 hours? Because I really need them back within 24 hours. And the answer I always get is, if the pockets are deep enough, then you can get. So fine, we have lots of money. I'll just make the point that the team has lots of money.
That's great. Well, I mean, your books don't get bogged down, so you're succeeding. Your books don't have enough that the plot and the process is important to them. So I think you strike the balance well. So I have a couple reading questions. So in your formative years, what did you read, and was there a book that made you think, I want to be a writer?
Ooh. Gosh.
Or an author, or...
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely, from that sort of 11 or 12, I read a lot of my mum's books. So I was reading Agatha Christie and Ruth Rendell, and absolutely loving them. And then probably as I got older, I went more perhaps onto the women's fiction side. So I came back to the crime genre probably in my early 20s. But I think the book that really stood out to me is, I mentioned Linda LaPlante, but it was actually, she's got an American series. Mm-hmm. And Cold Shoulder was probably the one that I loved. I love Linda LaPlante, but I think writing for an American audience, she wrote in a slightly different way, which I really, really liked. It was just a bit more energetic, I guess. The pace was a little bit more, it was probably a little bit more plot driven. So that was definitely. And then later, Tana French is in the woods, definitely. I mean, but if you start your career wanting to write like Tana French, you're on hiding to nothing, really. But those, I always talk about Linda LaPlante and Tana French, and it's interesting because they could be more different in terms of the way that they write. Yeah. But if you blend them together, you sort of have everything about what makes a great crime novel.
Well, I mean, you referencing those two authors fits your book so perfectly. It makes perfect sense to me. Like, I see the inspiration, I see where they came together, and we have Caz Frear and Cat Kinsella. So it must be so fun to, your reviews frequently get compared to Tana French too, or for fans of Tana French.
Amazing. Yeah. I think, you just can't get your head around that. And quite early, I think perhaps even before Sweet Little Lies was published, I remember getting the email from my agent to say Linda LaPlante had read Sweet Little Lies, and she quoted on it. And I actually have a frame of her quotes because there's moments like that at the time you just sort of think, oh, cool, that's really cool. And then sometimes you stop and think, like, I idolize that woman, and she read my book and thought it was good. And it's like Serena Williams saying, you've got a great forehand, you just can't get your head around it.
Yeah, those are the, like, my favorite stories to hear, because there's this giant full circle moment. We were I was talking with Sean Cosby the other day, who has this huge hit book this year, Blacktop Wasteland. And he grew up reading Stephen King. And I did an interview with Stephen King a few months ago, and he said that the book that he's recommending to everyone is Blacktop Wasteland. And, like, I mean, how cool is that? It doesn't get better than that. Like, this person you've idolized. So that's your Linda LaPlante story. Like, that's amazing. That's just terrific. Yeah, it's just fantastic. Okay, my last question for you is, what have you read recently and loved? Any books you want to point out to people?
Oh, gosh. I've read it. I've read so much. I was really lucky. I know a lot of people's reading mojos during lockdown wavered. People, you know,
mine's terrible
really,
reading mojo. Yeah,
really, mine went through the roof. Maybe not the first month or two when everything was a bit crazy. But I think once the new normal crept in, mine went through the roof. So I've read so much. I mean, I think that the one that's springing to mind, A, because I only finished it a week or so ago, and B, because it's going to be huge, is Girl A by Abigail Dean. I'm not sure if you read that one.
I have not read that one.
It's really, really interesting. It is crime, but it could equally sit under, you know, just literary fiction, I guess. And it's about a girl whose family she basically escapes from a religious cult. But when her mother dies and leaves the house to her, she has to go back and sort of confront the house and her brothers and sisters. So that was fabulous. I've just read a really great book called People Like Her by Ellery Lloyd, who are, I was going to say husband and wife team, but I'm not actually sure they are husband and wife team, but they're a team anyway. And it's got a really great premise in that we talk about social media and how everybody projects the perfect life, whereas this focuses on an Insta mum who projects this kind of, oh, I'm a big hot mess, and you know, my house is a mess, and I've got no money, and actually she's very, very privileged. So it's almost about how, you know, how you can be fooled in that way, that some people are pretending to be something they're not, but not necessarily to be brilliant. They're almost kind of trying to tone down their privilege to appeal. But yeah, someone gets wind of that, and yeah. Terrible.
Things happen.
Yeah, things happen. There's another Greenwich Park that's out next year by Catherine Faulkner. That was fantastic. Magpie Lane. I'm not sure if that was a real kind of word of mouth story over novel over here. So many. I haven't. I say I haven't read a bad book all year. I don't really read bad books. There are books that are more your thing than others, but yeah, I'm probably getting through about 2 books a week at the moment.
Oh my gosh, I'm so jealous. The amount of hours that we've been working has ramped up just because there's just a lot of work, which is great. Doing everything either as mail orders or emails and all of that takes a little bit more time. Plus, you know, we've been doing a ton of these virtual events, which are fantastic, but also take up time. And so just juggling all of that, like my reading time is already so much less than normal. And then I just still am super struggling with turning off work brain and reading. It's not even the pandemic at this point. It's just that we've been going so hard for so long these past few months that I don't know how to like stop it. So I'm super jealous of your reading. I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks and then reading the ones that I'm doing interviews on, which is great. But I'm definitely not doing 2 a week. So I'm very jealous of that. And so many of our customers who are reading just like book, they come in and want to talk about them. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I haven't read it yet. So anyway, I guess that's going to be it for today. I am, again, so excited to have gotten a chance to talk to you. Shed No Tears is out today. We have signed book plates available. If you haven't read the Cat Kinsella series before, you can start with this one, but we also always have paperbacks of Sweet Little Lies in stock. And if you want to order that, I'll be happy to send a book plate along with that one as well. I love this series. Several staff members love this series. We think they're just fantastic. If you like British police procedurals, if you like Hannah French, if you like Ruth Rendell, Lindsay LaPlante, straight up your alley. So definitely give Caz Frear a shot. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Bye.
Bye. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.